Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Lily Wetterlin and I'm working in the Eco-Hydrology and Water Quality Lab with Dr. Aaron Rivers. And today I'll be talking about how the addition of soil amendments to low impact development can help treat and intercept stormwater runoff. Specifically, the objective of my research is to look at different sources of soil amendments at different application rates to evaluate nutrient and metal export potential, the ability for these amendments to bind and retain contaminants, and how they can improve soil hydrologic properties. So stormwater has been identified as the leading source of pollution to all water body types by the EPA. And linked with urbanization, the number and variety of pollutant loads is increasing to water bodies. So in urbanized environments, there are impervious surfaces such as rooftops and roadways, and disturbed pervious surfaces such as compacted soils, which interfere with the natural course of stormwater runoff. So instead of infiltrating into soil, stormwater runoff accumulates in large quantities and rushes down these impervious surfaces or pervious disturbed surfaces, collecting pollutants. Typical stormwater pollutants of concern are metals that are either toxic to humans or aquatic life, and nitrogen and phosphorus species that can lead to eutrophication of water bodies. So these pollutants can come from a variety of sources, such as metals on rooftops, fertilizers and pet waste on lawns, and then more metals and atmospheric accumulation of other pollutants on roadways. And the impacts of stormwater runoff are not static. Pollutant loads typically increase with increased development. So as regions continue to transition towards more urbanized environments, creating stormwater mitigation plans are more important than ever to protect our water bodies from these pollutant loads. So excess nutrients, metals, sediments, and other pollutants can degrade water quality, kill or threaten aquatic life, impair drinking water sources, and make water treatment processes more difficult. So, and all water bodies are susceptible to stormwater runoff as long as they're in the urban catchment. So lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands can all have impacts from stormwater runoff. So this graph here is from a publication by Christopher Walsh. It was a publication titled The Urban Stream Syndrome. And they looked at 3 models comparing the biological condition and the biological condition of a stream within an urban catchment. And these 3 models are A, B, and C. I'm not going to get into the models, and please don't ask me about the models because I don't know the specifics. But essentially, I'm showing this so that you guys can all relate to it. You're all working in aquatic systems or in watersheds. And as imperviousness and urban density increase, the biological conditions of the stream decrease no matter what the model is. So how can we protect our water bodies from these impacts from stormwater runoff? So low impact development systems, which I'll be referring to as LIDs throughout this presentation, are a best management practice to mitigate the impacts of stormwater runoff. So LID designs have a lot of variability within them. The LIDs I'll be referring to within this presentation and that are related to my research specifically are vegetated filter strips pictured here, bioretention cells, and vegetated swales. So these LIDs are designed to mimic pre-development hydrologic conditions that utilize the biophysical properties of soil to intercept and treat stormwater runoff. Pollutants are removed through the settling, filtration, absorption, and biological uptake provided by LIDs. So here's a more detailed profile of an LID. So vegetation is a common component. It can be used for biological uptake of pollutants, and it also increases infiltration and soil health within the rooting zone. Underdrains are used dependent on site-specific requirements, so they're not always included in LID designs. So runoff is captured within this LID, and it is infiltrated through the soil, and it either continues on to groundwater or is discharged to receiving systems through this underdrain. So LIDs typically use native or existing soils. However, in urban environments, native soils are typically compacted and degraded, losing their hydrologic function. So engineered soil mixtures are often added to improve soil health and infiltration. So engineered soil mixtures may use topsoil Topsoil is often expensive and inaccessible in some regions, but incorporation of locally sourced amendments such as compost or biochar can serve as affordable options to improve soil health, promote plant growth, and increase infiltration rates. So the two soil amendments that I'm talking about are compost and biochar. So compost is a recycled waste material that's rich in nutrients that's been decomposed by organisms. It can come from a variety of sources such as food waste, yard waste, or composted manure. Biochar is a charcoal produced through pyrolysis, and it's very rich in carbon. It can also come from a variety of sources such as specific tree species, grasses, and agricultural waste. The chemical composition of both these amendments can vary greatly dependent on their source origin. However, regardless of their source origin, compost and biochar both contain common stormwater contaminants such as nitrogen, phosphorus, copper, and zinc. And while these increased nutrients can help promote plant growth, excess labile nutrients may be exported from the amendments themselves. So literature has looked at amendments within LIDs, and there's kind of a wide variability on recommendation rates. Some studies have suggested anywhere from 20 to 70% compost or biochar amendment application rate by volume. So there's been studies that have looked at different sources of materials, but very few have looked at application rates in terms of LID application. So there hasn't been a systematic comparison looking at both the source of amendment and the application rate to be applied, which brings me to my two research questions, which is the first, is there an optimal soil amendment source and application rate to improve soil hydrologic properties and minimize nutrient and metal export? And the second, what is the potential for these amended soils to bind and retain common stormwater contaminants? So I expect that labile nutrients will be exported within the first few storms from the amendments themselves. And then metals will leach out when absorption capacity is saturated or when associated with labile organic matter. And then amended soils increase surface area and organic matter, which in turn will increase absorption potential. So why do we want to know about specifications of amendments for LIDs? So LIDs are utilized by cities, counties, and state agencies to meet the requirements of stormwater permits, which are issued by the Division of Water Quality. Stormwater permits allow the discharge of stormwater to waters of the state on the condition that one, they mimic runoff mirrors pre-development hydrologic conditions, and two, minimizes impacts to water quality. So LIDs need to ensure that these stormwater requirements are being met. And as of July 1st, 2020, Utah is now requiring LIDs to be implemented with all new stormwater permits for any new or redevelopment greater than 1 acre or increasing impervious areas more than 10%. So in order to meet our water quality goals, we really need to understand what amendments we're using in these LID systems and what their potential is to bind and retain common stormwater contaminants. So to answer these questions, I'll be doing a series of experiments within the lab. The first is a plot scale experiment where I'll be using two large scale soil boxes, comparing a amended versus a non-amended vegetated filter strip design. The second is a lab column experiment, which will be using column flow through experiments to systematically compare different soil amendment types at different application rates under simulated storm events. The third will be looking into how well these amendments are able to bind and retain common stormwater contaminants. So here is a picture of one of the soil boxes that we're using for the plot scale experiments. So like I said, we're going to be looking at two of these. So this is a vegetated non-amended soil box, and we'll also be looking at a vegetated amended soil box using a yard waste compost at a 20% application rate. Each of these soil boxes will be exposed to 9 simulated storm events with intermittent dry periods. The leachate, which will be the runoff coming through this port here, and also the infiltrated water out of here, will be created into a composite sample and then will be analyzed for dissolved nutrients, metals, organic carbon, and total suspended solids. Throughout this experiment, we'll also be looking at soil hydrologic properties. So soil moisture content and infiltration rates will be measured. Second experiment is really diving into my first research question, which is looking at if there's an optimal soil amendment source and application rate for use in LID systems. So to do this, we'll be using column flow-through experiments. Column experiments are a really great way to test a lot of variables before implementing anything in the field. So for the amendments we'll be looking at are 3 different types of compost from 3 different sources. One's a steer manure compost, a green waste compost, which is a mix of yard and food waste, and then a mushroom compost, which is a mix of forestry products. We'll be looking at 1 biochar, that is a wood waste derived biochar. These are all locally sourced within northern Utah. And then each of these 4 amendments will be tested at 4 different application rates. 5, 10, 25, and 50% by volume will be mixed with a sandy loam soil that's representative of Utah's native soils, and that may be used in LID systems. So in total, with all these variables, there are 16 columns and then plus 1 control, so 17 columns. And here's the diagram of one of the columns setups here on the right. So each column will undergo 5 simulated storm events with 2 weeks of drying. During a storm event, we will apply synthetic stormwater with typical stormwater pollutant loads representative of northern Utah to the column over a 2-hour period. For 12 hours, the leachate will be allowed to drain, and then the leachate will be collected and analyzed for dissolved nutrients, metals, organic carbon, and total suspended solids. So to look at soil hydrologic properties, we'll be looking at the moisture content before and after each storm, and then following each series of 5 storms, once the media has had time to settle, we'll look at the resulted bulk density and also the saturated hydraulic conductivity. This entire experiment will be done in triplicate, and average values will be used for statistical analysis. So my final experiment is really digging into the question of what is the potential of these different soil amendment sources and blends to bind and retain common stormwater contaminants. So here is a lovely soil particle. Soil particles are negatively charged, and dependent on the soil type, they have a varying degree of a cation exchange capacity. And pretty much that means it has some absorption potential for free ions. So free ions such as orthophosphate, copper, and ammonium, which are typically found in stormwater, will be passing through the soil, and they'll hopefully be attracted and latch onto this soil particle. Cation exchange capacity increases with increased surface area and increased organic matter, which amendments are able to provide. So hopefully with amended soils, these free ions will be really attracted to the particles and bind and latch on. So to look at how well they're binding and latching, we'll be performing a series of absorption, desorption experiments using standard methods. So again, why does this research matter? So in the DWQ LID guidebook, they actually recommend the use of compost for LID systems. However, they have no specifications on amendment type or application rates. And in order to meet our water quality goals, we really need to know the media that we're putting into these treatment systems. And from past literature, optimal amendment specifications in LIDs can greatly reduce runoff, increase pollutant retention, and greatly improve soil hydrologic properties. I'd like to give a special thanks to Dr. Erin Rivers. She's been amazing helping me design this experiment and all her mentorship. I'd also like to thank my thesis committee. They've been a big part of my experimental design. And then I'd like to thank my funding sources, which is the Utah Department of Transportation and Extension Water Initiative. Chuck.
Any of an LID affect efficiency? I imagine that any sort of soil amendment is going to expire away over 5 years, whatever. And so
Can you repeat?
Imagine that efficiency of absorption was very,
Yeah,
something you worried about.
yes, definitely LIDs like the media. It's from things I've read, it's kind of been shown that LIDs are just, they are kind of like a water treatment process. Like they need some sort of requirement or like they need to be maintained. So it's likely that the absorption capacity would be saturated within these systems. And so there probably would have to be removal efforts of like the upper layers and maybe even some of the fill layers to keep those pollutant loads at bay. So Utah doesn't have like a huge hand in LIDs yet. I don't know about other regions, and I don't really know the answer to that question. But I think it probably depends on where it is and who's managing it. I could see people just walking away and them being abandoned, but it really probably depends on, who's managing them and also how, they are part of a stormwater permit. So if they're doing water quality testing on it to meet the obligations of that permit, they might be more obliged to take care of it. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a consideration when building them. Any other questions?
How much, so you'll do your experiment, how much does place matter then? So would you expect to come up with some recommendation of compost? Would you expect the LAD to function the same like in Logan or Salt Lake City as it is in different climate and geology?
Yes and no. This soil that we're specifically using is specific to northern Utah. So it probably, really what I've learned from all my readings in this project is the soils you're mixing with the amendments are almost just as important as the amendments themselves, because there can be a lot of reactions happening between the two. So it would definitely be wise to investigate maybe those soil types specifically before being like, this is the optimal amendment for all of Utah. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to take that as no.